competitions portion of this. And the first, we're going to talk about two different writing competitions that are US specific. So if you're not from the US, sorry, but you can also wait for the third one that we're going to talk about, which is like a bit broader and kind of applies regardless of if you're in the US or outside of the US. So the first one is Scholastic, and Scholastic is a pretty good one to start. It's a one that's really popular nationally. A lot of people do it. And I think one of the major points, I'm sure you guys can read for yourselves, so I'll let you guys read this as well. But one of the major drawing points I think that we can highlight about it is that there's a lot of different awards available for Scholastic. The way it works is you get regional awards, and then once you move on from the regional one, you're eligible for these sort of national awards. So if you've never done any of these before, it's a really good idea to start with Scholastic because there's a good chance that you can win like an honorable mention at a regional level if you're not super sure about being able to win some sort of like national level. But if you are really good, you do have the opportunity to win nationals. So the genres for this is pretty much literally any type of writing. They have 11 different categories. And even if you don't find a category, I'm pretty sure they have a category called future news. So literally any writing is submittable and eligible for this competition. It's for grades 7 to 12. So it's also good to start early, like if you're in 7th grade right now, or if you're younger, to like keep this in mind, because the more you submit, then obviously the more chances you have. The deadlines are usually in December or January. The results tend to come out for regions in like February or late January. And then a few months later are the national results. There's a $7 cost, but there's fee waivers, and there's a lot of scholarships actually that you can win through Scholastic Art and Writing. So beyond the like regional and national awards, they also have a lot of special awards depending on like if your writing fits a certain theme. Like for example, there's like a One Earth Award if your writing is about like say environmentalism, or if there's the American Voices one, which is like if your writing they think represents like an identity about America and stuff. So that's the basics of Scholastic. So now if you're like finally, you're like decided that you want to do Scholastic, this is the part where we need to make an extremely important disclaimer. And that disclaimer is don't write for competitions. Because if you're writing purely for competitions and not for like yourself or for like because you have like thoughts that you want to write down, your writing isn't going to be genuine. And if it's not meaningful to you, it's not going to be meaningful to anyone who reads it either. So I would say never, never, never just write for like competitions. Programs are a little different sometimes because they'll have specific like answer this prompt, but like for competitions, I would say never specifically write for a competition. You can use it as like a goal, a sort of motivator, and you can use certain prompts as like inspiration, but I would say never just write for the sake of competition. So instead, look towards selecting pieces. So if you're writing a lot, then you're probably going to have like a good amount of pieces to choose from. So this is going to be talking about how to choose the pieces that you're going to submit and also how to revise them a little bit. So Scholastic, there's a bit of an inside joke among Scholastic about like mango bowls from your parents. Like it's just kind of a thing that they like a lot. And it's not necessarily like the worst thing in the world. Sometimes it's a bit weird because it's like commodification of trauma and like identity, but at the same time, you can't really help it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is technique with Scholastic. So obviously, like with any writing competition, technique's really important. And the main thing like this encompasses is like whether or not you effectively use things like imagery, figurative language, your structure of your words and things like that. And obviously there's not a single right way to go about this, but it's pretty much just like, can you write to a degree that's well? And the only way that I would say that you can really improve on this is just write a lot, but mostly read a lot. Like read a lot of poems, read a lot of books. If you want to enter in short story, read a bunch of short stories. Because then through reading these, you see like what good writing is, what good writing can be. And you don't necessarily need to like copy like the style of any of these things that you write, but the more that you read, the more options you have and the more like good options you have too with how you can take your writing. Now, even if you have great technique though, sometimes Scholastic will be a little strange. At the end of the day, writing is subjective. So if you want to like pick pieces that you think are going to win, there's a good chance that if you pick ones that emphasize some sort of authenticity, like identity and trauma and these sort of things, you'll get picked. So these include like, and if you're like, oh no, I'm just like a plain cracker of a person, I don't have anything interesting about me, I think like if you're digging deep enough, you can find something, whether it's like so they like things like if you're a minority race, that sort of perspective, if you're part of LGBTQ community, that sort of perspective. But like there's also just smaller like things that they also like tend to like. So any sort of like traumatic event, which is really sad, but any sort of traumatic event that's ever happened to you. But also they really like stories about family because family tends to be like genuine. Everyone has like a story about their family and it's genuine and it's not like some sort of like made up like really angsty thing, I guess. So they really like this sort of idea of identity and trauma, but I would say never just specifically write about trauma for the sake of writing about trauma for like a competition. Again, like if you just happen to have pieces that kind of fall into some of these categories, you might want to select those to send, and also you might revise them in ways that highlight the sort of authenticity of them and highlight the sort of like genuine experience. Okay.
Like, I'm pretty plain, I have to say, and I may not have as much like traumatic experiences when I like apply to Scholastic, but I also find that if you write about history or like historical events, they also tend to like that too. So you don't have to write about traumatic experiences to win. And also, it tends to be a little all over the place because I have to say, like, some of my least favorite pieces have won, and you just gotta not take it personally and just be like, okay, they personally liked that, but that doesn't mean that these other ones aren't good. So you shouldn't use like this specific competition to like harm your self-esteem, because at the end of the day, you know, it's just what one group of people have to say.
Definitely, definitely. So with my own personal experience with Scholastic, so I've won 3 different golds over the years and like a few silver nationals as well. And it's always been the pieces that I didn't really expect were going to win. Like I didn't know what like they saw in it. So it's always across the board. And if you want to get an idea of sort of like what they like even a little bit better, they actually have an online gallery. They reduced it last year. Like they took away a bunch of their archived stuff for some reason, but there still is like some pieces up there that you can read and you can kind of get a sense of what they're looking for, what type of writing they tend to prefer. And that's at like their website, artandwriting.org.
Hey everyone, it's Liz again. So now we're going to be talking about National Young Arts. And National Young Arts is kind of like Scholastic because they're both national writing competitions. But what's interesting about Young Arts is that it's an interdisciplinary competition. So if you're into dance or music or visual arts, you can apply, you can be a winner in that. And basically it's a competition, but at its core it's a development program for the top writers and artists across the nation. That sounds like really like up there and prestigious, but like trust me, like they're like the thing with Young Arts is like you never expect to like I guess like I didn't personally expect to win, but like they really value like unique voices and there's not really like a pattern of like the mango cutting with Scholastic. Like there's really no inside joke, but they usually like take pieces that are like edgy and like dark, I guess, but also pieces that are just really like um you don't have to subvert the genre, but just like pieces that speak to you, like whether you're talking about like your cultural identity or in terms of or like creative nonfiction, there's a lot of like categories for that. So as long as you write something that's true to you and something that you feel that only you can tell, like a story that you only you can tell, then like you're gold. No pun intended. Um, so what awards are there? You can be a winner at 1 or 3 levels depending on judging and how many categories you submit in. So there's honorable mention, merit, which are both like regional level awards, and then there's finalist. And in addition to getting like monetary awards, which isn't like the main point of writing competitions, you also get to do like these week-long intensive called National Young Arts Week. This week it was national. I mean, this year it was National Young Arts Week Plus, and you basically get together with your fellow finalists, and you workshop pieces. You do intensive based on the category entered in. So if you entered in player script, then you'd be working with Vanessa Garcia, who's like an accomplished playwright who's written for like Sesame Street, Starter Home Theater Company, um, and so many amazing people. And as a finalist in play and script and a merit winner in spoken word, I can definitely say that that experience alone was better than any like award or name. And it really like brings you together, brings you closer to a lot of people who not only share your discipline, but then you also get to meet people from different disciplines. And it's just an amazing experience. So you can enter when you're 15 to 18. It says 10 to 12, but there are a lot of like college winners, like people in their first year of college. And it opens in June, July, so you have plenty of time to work on your pieces. Don't procrastinate, but if you do procrastinate, that's okay, because two of my fellow Young Arts finalists submitted 2 minutes before the deadline, and that's not an advisable thing to do. But just know that if you like, just just try it. Like the worst thing that can happen is like not getting an award. I know that sounds really hypocritical to say, but Young Arts is this thing where they give you feedback. Like if your work entered like the last round of judging, and personally that was really helpful because that like lets you know what they liked and like what you can improve on for next time. And I don't think I'd be like as I guess like I wouldn't have improved my writing if it hadn't been for that feedback or asking other people for feedback. And another thing that's really good is like sort of that writing community, like AsterLit. I'm so grateful for having friends who are like writers and like people I can workshop my pieces with. So it's really good to just have people read over your pieces so you can get a different perspective, because that's kind of how it is in judging, except you're getting it from your friends and they're like 20 years younger than like the national panelists. So in terms of scholarships, okay, money, clout. Okay, so now Young Arts gives a lot of scholarships ranging from $100 for merit, $250 for honorable mention, and $1,000 to $10,000 for finalists, and there are different levels. So based on your piece that you submitted, that got you to be a winner, and also how you do during National Young Arts Week. So like, how much do you participate? How many risks are you willing to take? It sounds weird. I don't really know how it works either, but it's based on like a multitude of factors, and then they give you different levels, like level 1 or level 2, silver, gold. But if you're a senior, you also get to become a presidential scholar, and that's one of the highest awards in the nation for arts, or also for education. You can be a presidential scholar, and there's a whole essay requirement, and you have to submit your GPA, but that's usually like in the beginning of the year, or if you win as a sophomore or junior, then you can apply the year you become a senior. So in terms of my personal experience, again, I never expected to be a National Young Arts finalist, and that just goes to show you that like take that risk. Like if you think, like even if you're starting out, like if you're writing short stories for the first time, or you're writing poetry for the first time, like submit it. Like I think all of the spoken word finalists were like new to spoken word, and it's just great because you get to like really experiment, and they kind of value people who experiment. So really don't like, especially like don't plagiarize, like that's a given, but also if you feel like you need to tell your story a certain way, like just write how you would personally like to write that story, instead of like living up to expectations of like lit mags or like that tell you how you're supposed to write. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, of course, like I'd be happy to answer at the end. But I also know for National Young Arts, you can apply as many times, like you can apply each year. Even so, if you're a merit or an honorable mention, then you get to apply to be a finalist the next year. So don't be afraid to keep trying, and don't be afraid to take risks. That's my note to leave you with.
So now I'm going to be talking about some like smaller and niche and more local competitions, because as awesome as Scholastic and Young Arts are, there are lots of other opportunities that you can pursue that oftentimes are on a smaller or more local scale. And if you guys are familiar with scholarships, mainly in the US, you can think of it kind of like applying to the Coca-Cola scholarship, like a super large and super selective scholarship versus a smaller regional scholarship, where sometimes the prizes might might be lower, but the chances of you winning are higher because the applicant pool is smaller. So the benefits of these obviously are that you have a higher chance of winning, and that actually the principle of the Coca-Cola scholarship doesn't translate directly because sometimes the monetary compensation or other direct awards can be actually greater for these local competitions. So for example, I did Scholastic, and when I got a gold medal, I didn't get any special scholarships or anything, so I didn't actually get any monetary compensation from Scholastic, whereas I've done some other essay contests and more local and more just on a smaller scale writing competitions like Novelly. They have some great ones, and I got a lot more money from those. And then there's also some things like you might have more interaction with your fellow winners. So one example of that is I did an essay contest from the Goy International Peace Foundation, and there are like lists of winners, and one of the people who also won in my category, she's from Morocco, and she actually reached out to me from like the list of people on Instagram, and I've actually become pretty good friends through that. So that could also be a potential benefit. And if you're writing in a specific niche, then you can also grow your expertise in that area. And then if it's a local competition, you can also win some local clout, and you might be able to have more accessible award ceremonies. For example, like Scholastic's award ceremony is in New York normally, but not all of us live in New York, so if it's in a local chapter near your area, then you're more likely to be able to attend that with few issues. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the different types of these smaller competitions that you might want to sort your search into if you would like. But so for local essay contests, a lot of the times these come in the form of chapters of larger essay contests. So examples include Optimist International and the Society of Women Engineers, where oftentimes they have like a national level competition, but to submit to that, you submit to a local level, and then you can win awards at that local level. And then there are also smaller national writing competitions, and for these, oftentimes the trick is just finding lists online. So examples of that include Torrance Creativity Awards, the Ringling Storytellers of Tomorrow, and as I mentioned, Novelly, where sometimes there'll be themed competitions, sometimes there'll be open submissions, but they're kind of like what we just talked about, like Young Arts and Scholastic on a smaller scale. So usually fewer categories, usually just creative nonfiction, fiction, and poetry. And yeah, again, it's just applying the benefits. You have to weigh what you value more with your contests. And then the last portion is niche essay contests. So for these essay contests that revolve around a specific topic or a specific subject, you'd want to consider your identity, interests, and expertise, and how that might lead you to certain subjects to pursue. So one example of that is, as I mentioned, like the Goy Peace Foundation, they do an essay contest related to youth and peace, essentially. So if you're interested in those ideas, then you might be a good fit for that essay contest. And then linked here is just and you can also look these up on your own. These are just an example. If someone had like a niche interest in neuroscience, then you might want to pursue any of those many opportunities for neuroscience essay contests. So now we're just going to talk about some strategies for finding and keeping track of these smaller opportunities. So I'll actually put the link in the chat, a list I compiled of some other lists of essay competitions and writing competitions, because that is really your first step, is going to be Google searching and sifting through all the lists that already exist on the internet. And you can actually find oftentimes lists of essay contests or essay scholarships on Reddit or Quora if you look. But of course, we need an asterisk there because you don't want to spend too much time on those platforms. So I honestly would recommend setting like timers each time you go on to avoid getting sucked into a time hole. But yeah, so just Google searching like something you're interested in, and then essay contest, or searching your area essay contest. Those can all get you some good results and are a really good place to start. And then another option, if you're looking for local opportunities, is to ask your teachers and school officials and counselors about those local opportunities, because oftentimes they have a very good understanding of what is offered in your area. And then this is something I personally do a lot, is I productively stalk upperclassmen on LinkedIn, because on LinkedIn a lot of times you can see in like the honors and awards section, people will list all like the awards they get, and especially if they're doing writing, sometimes they'll have a lot, and sometimes I'll just look up the ones that look interesting to me and save it to my bookmarks bar. And that is actually the last step, is keeping track of all these opportunities you find through these means. Is I would recommend using bookmarks on your browser, because that's what I personally do, and I also use spreadsheets to stay on track. You can also subscribe to newsletters, so that even if you're not eligible or they're not accepting entries at the time you find the opportunity, you can be notified when they do start opening up. And then these are just some examples of spreadsheet kind of formats that you might want to use. So the one on the left is what I use actually for multiple applications, so not just writing. So you can kind of see that just helps me keep track of what's been submitted, what's not, and what deadlines are which, and then just helps me keep track of what I'm applying to and where the links are and everything like that. And then over there on the right, so that's a Google Sheet. On the right, that's actually a Notion spreadsheet, which you can also use. It's more simplistic than Google Sheets, but it's also very functional. So those are also great options.